Hello students, teachers, parents, history nerds. Hello everybody and welcome to Nutshelled History, where we lay out the facts, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today we are going to continue our United States history series by looking at England's American colonies. Don't forget that there's a link for a fill-in-the-blank worksheet in the description. I just ask that you like and subscribe. I apologize for any mispronunciations ahead of time. I do my best. Okay, let's go. So picture this. A bunch of rich guys sweet-talk the king into giving them a permission slip to start colonies. They pool their cash, forming a joint stock company because teamwork makes the dream work, right? In the 1580s, Sir Walter Raleigh has two epic fails trying to settle on Roanoke Island. Fast forward to 1607, the Virginia Company lands in Chesapeake Bay, which has everything: great harbors, rivers, and farmland. Powhatan, the local bigwig, thinks he can play the English against his foes and score some shiny new weapons. In 1619, they set up the House of Burgesses, the first colonial government body, because even colonists need laws and taxes. By 1624, Virginia is a royal colony owned by the king, while other colonies are run by individuals or companies. Jump to 1675, there's a major showdown between settlers and Indians in the Potomac Valley. Governor Berkeley tries to stop the madness, but Nathaniel Bacon and his crew stage Bacon's rebellion and give Berkeley a major headache. Meanwhile, in 1632, Maryland pops up as a safe haven for Catholics, courtesy of Lord Baltimore. By 1670, the English set up Carolina, and by 1691, split it into North and South Carolina. Lastly, in 1732, James Oglethorpe founds Georgia as a fresh start for English debtors, rounding out the chaotic, drama-filled beginnings of the English colonies. The New England colonies were basically started by a bunch of religious rebels called Puritans, who thought the Church of England was still way too Catholic. Some were even more rebellious, called Separatists, who went off and started their own churches. The Puritans believed that living a good life might get them some divine brownie points, but ultimately, salvation was up to God. They came from all walks of life: farmers, shopkeepers, and skilled artisans, and were often persecuted for challenging the official church. Some decided to find a new haven in the colonies. In 1620, the first Puritan emigrants, later known as Pilgrims, hopped on the Mayflower and sailed across the Atlantic to set up Plymouth Colony in Massachusetts. Before stepping off the ship, they made the Mayflower Compact, agreeing to form a government and follow its rules. This self-government idea became a big deal in American history. By 1630, a bigger group of Puritans landed in Boston, with their leader John Winthrop urging them to make their colony an inspiring example for England. From there, they spread out, settling New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. The Puritans weren't exactly fans of religious freedom. In the 1630s, Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson annoyed the authorities by saying Massachusetts hadn't broken enough with Anglican traditions. They hightailed it to Rhode Island, which became a rare spot for religious tolerance and separation of church and state. So starting in 1609, Dutch merchant ships cruised across the Atlantic, sailed up the Hudson River, and started swapping furs with the Indians. By 1614, they set up Fort Nassau on the upper river. And in 1626, to keep an eye on things, they built New Amsterdam at the tip of Manhattan. It quickly became the colony's biggest town, main port, and headquarters. The Dutch West India Company ran the show, appointing a governor and a council of top colonists. New Netherland was pretty chill with different religions, even welcoming Jews, but didn't attract a lot of new settlers. Turns out, the Dutch weren't as eager to leave home as the English. By 1664, the English muscled in, making the Dutch governor hand over New Amsterdam, which they promptly renamed New York, after the Duke of York. This area, situated between the Chesapeake and New England colonies, became known as the Middle Colonies. The Duke of York also carved out land between the Hudson and Delaware rivers for a new colony called New Jersey. Pennsylvania started as a debt repayment from King Charles II to William Penn. Penn was a Quaker, part of a radical Protestant group that valued mystical experiences, believed in gender equality, refused military service, and tolerated other faiths. In 1680, the king granted Penn land west of the Delaware River, which became Pennsylvania, or Penn's Woods. Penn arrived in 1682 and set up Philadelphia. By making peace with local Indians, Pennsylvanians avoided the native rebellions that plagued other colonies. Thanks to their mix of ethnicities and religions, the Middle Colonies were a sneak preview of America's future diversity. After 1660, English emigration decreased, but Scottish emigration soared. Generally poorer than the English, the Scots had more reasons to seek their fortunes elsewhere. Germans were second only to the Scots-Irish as immigrants to British America. Most of the German immigrants were Protestant, seeking to escape war, taxes, and religious persecution. As the number of indentured servants declined in the late 1600s, many colonists turned to another source of labor: enslaved Africans. By law, the position as slave was passed from parent to child. This change in legal status promoted the racist idea that people of African origin were inferior to whites. Once firmly established in the colonies, slavery expanded rapidly. Enslaved Africans came to the Americas as part of a three-part voyage called the Triangular Trade. In the Middle Passage, shippers carried the enslaved Africans across the Atlantic to the American colonies. The brutality of the Middle Passage was extreme, and at least 10% of those making the trip in the 1700s did not survive. In the mid-1600s, Parliament decided to micromanage colonial trade with a series of laws known as the Navigation Acts, which basically said, only English ships with English sailors can trade with our colonies. This was all part of mercantilism, the idea that building wealth and power means selling stuff for gold and silver. These laws supercharged English colonial commerce, sparking a consumer revolution that flooded the colonies with more and cheaper goods. The Middle Colonies had family farms too, but they were rolling in dough compared to New England. A milder climate let them grow and export wheat, leading to a boom in the 18th century. Meanwhile, the southern colonies, with their warm climate and long growing season, were the rock stars of colonial agriculture. Virginia and Maryland planters grew tobacco, a staple crop always in demand, while North Carolina produced cattle and lumber, and South Carolina and Georgia harvested rice and indigo. Social life also varied across these regions. The Middle Colonies were the melting pot, attracting European immigrants and becoming the most ethnically and culturally diverse region in the British Empire. They offered religious tolerance and better economic opportunities. In the southern colonies, the plantation economy, driven by slavery, created massive profits for a few rich planters, but left most white folks as ordinary farmers. The focus on cash crops came at the expense of cultural development and economic opportunities for the masses. Compared with the Spanish or French rulers, the English monarch exercised little direct control over the colonists. The English monarchs were bound to uphold the provisions of the Magna Carta. This document limited the king's ability to tax nobles. It also guaranteed due process, or the right to a trial. During the 1300s, the lawmaking body known as Parliament evolved. During the 1600s and 1700s, Europe experienced an intellectual movement known as the Enlightenment. It challenged old ways of thinking about science, religion, and government. Enlightenment ideas changed the way American colonists, such as Benjamin Franklin, viewed the world as well. The colonists' outlook was also shaped by a new movement of heightened religious fervor, known as the Great Awakening. Preachers such as Jonathan Edwards and George Whitefield stressed an emotional and deeply personal religious experience. The Great Awakening inspired the American people with a sense of their own power as individuals. It also led many colonists to believe that if they could choose their method of worship, they could decide on their form of government. There you have it, folks. That is England's American colonies nutshelled. Thanks for stopping by Nutshelled History. Don't forget to go nuts on all those like and subscribe and comments things. See y'all next time.